Greetings. So in this video, we're going to try to bring it all together. Let's start with dividing the immune system first. So there's a couple of odds and ends that I'm hoping to cover before we start to bring this together. So dividing the immune system, remember we divided it into innate and adaptive immunity. And it's got to do with whether that part of the immunity differentiates between enemies. If it does, then it's adaptive. If it doesn't, then it's innate. Okay, there is another way to divide this or divide our immune system, and it's got to do with how we acquire the immunity. And the way to think about it is, let's say if our body does the work to acquire the immunity, then we call it active immunity. If we didn't do any work and it was just given to us, then we call it passive immunity. Okay, the way I think about it is muscles. If you want to develop muscles, either you go to the gym or drink muscle juice or inject muscle juice, right? So one is active, one is passive. Okay. But if no work is done, then it's passive. If the body does the work, then it's active. Now, one can gain passive immunity through natural means. So, for example, milk gives you IgA, placenta gives you IgG. So the baby gets IgA from the milk and IgG from the placenta. So that's the natural way that baby gets passive immunity, because the baby doesn't have to do work. Baby's body doesn't have to do work. Also, if you go in and you get IgG therapy, or you get some IgGs against a certain disease, or you get plasma, which has antibodies, okay? So again, it's not natural like mother's milk or placenta. It's artificial. We give it to you. But again, you didn't have to do the work. Your immune system didn't have to do the work. So this is artificial and it's passive. Okay? Now, what if the body does the work to acquire it? If it's active, what if you get an infection? Well, guess what? Your body gets the infection, it does the work. It's the natural active way to get immunity. Body has to do the work and it's the natural way. Well, what if we give you vaccine? Well, the body still has to work, but it's not natural because we gave you man-made stuff. Okay? So that's one of the ways to think about this. That's another way we divide the immune system. And as we're looking at therapeutics, this will come to pass, especially when we're looking at uh, antibody therapy and vaccines. So let's talk about how we bring it all together. So let's focus on bacteria and fungi. Like I said, this is a very simplified presentation, and the hope is to bring all the cytokines and the cells together so that you see how the whole thing works. And like I said, it's simplified, but it gives you an overall view of what it is. So let's start with bacteria and fungi. So here's the bacteria. They come in, you have histamines, leukotrienes, and prostaglandins. And then there's cell damage that causes arachidonic acid, and there's more prostaglandins and leukotrienes that come out, right? And they cause inflammation. Okay, with inflammation, you now have the complement system that comes out, and you have neutrophils and macrophages that come out. We covered complements using chemotaxis, opsonins, and MAC attack. They kill the pathogen and they attach via 3 pathways. Okay, and if you're not sure, make sure you review those videos that we've covered it priorly. We've covered this in prior videos. Okay, so again, with inflammation, we attract neutrophils and macrophages, and we do it through certain processes that we have covered already. Neutrophils swallow the bacteria, give us the antigen that go into the lymph nodes, and we talked about the mechanisms it uses to do that. Macrophages increase our temperature, increase CRP, and increase WBC. And it actually takes the antigen and presents it, and it goes into the lymph nodes, okay? Or lymph system, sorry, okay? Now, within the lymph system, whether you're an antigen or you're antigen presenting cell, the antigen gets picked up by B cells, specific B cells, and the end product is you have an antigen presenting cell that is presenting the antigen on an MHC molecule, and this is that foreign antigen. Okay? When this is done, CD4 T helper cell attaches to it. There's a co-stimulation mechanism, and that causes more clonal B and T cells that are specific to that antigen. The B cells differentiate into plasma cells and they give you more antibodies. And the antibodies are what are the key here, because on the adaptive side, they neutralize, precipitate, opsonize antigen antibody complexes and attract the macrophages, and they get rid of the bacteria or the foreign antigen. Okay, so that's bacteria. Let's talk about viruses and tumors. There's three big pathways because again, viruses and tumors are intracellular. So again, you have macrophages and other cells. So when viruses infect them, other cells produce interferons alpha and beta. Macrophages produce alpha and beta and interferon gamma. Interferon gamma does what? Makes WBCs, makes more WBCs, makes them bigger, makes them more responsive to antigen. Interferons alpha and beta, they put the nearby cells on notice and say, hey, we're in trouble. You're going to have some enemies come your way. So the nearby cells create scissor proteins that cut the virus if the viruses try to get inside them. And then they also attract the T natural killer cells that come there and they say, huh, what's going on with the MHC? And is the self antigen not good or is it tagged? And so there's three mechanisms by which it recognizes. Once it recognizes it to be the bad player, creates holes and causes apoptosis of that cell. So that's mechanism one. Mechanism two is you have your cytotoxic T cell, which is your CD8 cell, which connects to the cell that has been infected by the virus or has cancer. Okay. And then the T cell receptor on the cytotoxic cell attaches to that antigen, which used to be self-antigen, but now has changed because of the changes caused by either cancer or caused by the virus that has infected the cell. And then again, once the TCR, T cell receptor, and the CD8 connect to that bad cell, and then they destroy by creating holes in the cell or causing apoptosis. The third mechanism is the macrophage eats the bad cell and presents it to the B cell. Uh, you know, or, uh, and well, no, so macrophage eats the bad cell, and or there might be an antigen that might get presented to the B cell, and both of them actually present themselves to T helper cells. And then the T helper cells again um, cause lots of B cells and plasma cells, and then they cause antibodies to be formed. Once the antibodies are formed, it's either complement system and or T natural killer cells that come in and kill all the cells that have got that antigen on there. So there are three mechanisms. We have interferons that cause the viruses and tumor not to do their job, the cytotoxic T cells and macrophages. Parasites, IgE antibodies tag the parasite, eosinophils attach to it, and then their granules secrete toxic protein, and then they kill the worms or the parasites. Last but not the least, toxins. That's where mast cells come in, and IgE tag those toxins like pollen, and then the mast cell release histamine that causes inflammation, that causes eaters like macrophages to come in and eat and remove the debris, and neutrophils to try to process the antigen and get rid of the antigen. So Just real quick, let's go through this again and make sure we're able to recap. So again, with the immune system, we talked about active versus passive immunity. Active is where body does the work. If the body does it naturally, then it's, through natural means like infection, it's natural active. If it's given vaccine, which is artificial or man-made, but it still does the work, then it's active immunity, and that's how it's acquired. Passive immunity is um, where no work is done by the immune system, it's just given to the immune system. If it's through artificial means like IVIG, then it's artificial passive immunity. And if it's natural means like lactation and baby getting it through placenta, then it's passive immunity. And again, it's passive natural immunity. We covered steps that are involved in how the bacteria are attacked by innate immunity and adaptive immunity. And the next step we talked about was viruses and how macrophages, cytotoxic T cells, um, um, and macrophages in particular, attack the viruses and process the viruses. We also talked about the parasites and how IgEs attach with the eosinophils to get rid of parasites and worms, and how IgE attaches with the mast cells and basophils to release histamine and manage that particular threat.